I still remember the way she laughed. Not a playful laugh, not the kind that fills a room with warmth. It was sharp, brittle, the sound of disbelief breaking against ambition. "A designer?" she'd said, setting her teacup down with that practiced little shake of the head. "Sweetheart, people like us don't make a living drawing dresses." I'd smiled then, the kind of smile you wear when your heart is burning but you can't afford to show smoke. That night, I sat on my bed sketching under the yellow bulb, my hands trembling but steady enough to keep creating the world she refused to see. Back then, our house was always loud, TV blaring, my brother Jason shouting over video games, Mom on the phone complaining about the price of flour. I tried to disappear between the noise. My sketchbooks were my refuge. Every dress I drew was a version of myself, graceful, confident, chosen. I thought if I designed enough beauty, maybe it would spill out of the pages and into our lives. At 17, I entered a local fashion contest. First prize was a small scholarship to a design school in Portland. I stayed up 3 nights sewing my own entry out of curtains and thrift store lace. When I showed it to Mom, she actually laughed so hard she cried. "Who's going to buy that, honey? Ghosts?" Jason recorded it on his phone and uploaded it with the caption, "My sister thinks she's Chanel." The post went viral in our town, not in the good way. I went to school the next morning and heard the whispers following me down the hallway like cigarette smoke. I won 3rd place. Not enough for the scholarship, but enough to remind me I wasn't crazy. When I brought the ribbon home, Mom didn't look up from the TV. "3rd?" she asked. "You spent 3 nights for 3rd?" She turned up the volume on her soap opera and said, "You'd better start thinking about real work." 2 years later, I was working double shifts at a boutique in the mall, saving every tip. I enrolled in night classes for textile design, hiding the receipts in a notebook because I didn't want another lecture about throwing away money on dreams. Jason had already moved out by then, got a job at Dad's old mechanic shop, and Mom liked to brag about how her boy was practical. Sometimes she'd drop by the store, pretending she was just window shopping, but really checking if I'd failed yet. "Still folding clothes, huh?" she'd smirk. "Guess you didn't learn much from those fancy sketches." It was the small humiliations that built the wall between us. The way she'd tell guests I played with fabric, the way she'd sigh when the mail came and there wasn't a paycheck addressed to me. Yet every time she cut me down, something inside me sharpened. I stopped waiting for her to believe and started learning to prove. When I finally moved to Portland, she didn't even come to the station. "Call me when it doesn't work out," she'd said. I took her advice literally. I never called. The city was loud and indifferent, but at least it didn't laugh at me. I rented a room the size of a closet and stitched sample pieces for local designers. I learned pattern software, fabrics, clients, budgets. Every rejection hurt less than my mother's laughter had. That's the thing about pain. Once you've heard it from someone you love, strangers can't touch you. 3 years later, I was assistant designer at a startup label called Astor & Co. We specialized in sustainable fashion, handmade linen, and small batch designs. The pay was modest, but the recognition grew fast. My sketches started appearing on runways, no longer folded under my bed. Every time my name appeared in print, I thought about calling her. Imagined her pretending not to care. Imagined myself pretending not to need her. I didn't call. Then one afternoon, an email arrived from a realtor in my hometown. It was short and formal. "Your mother listed her house for sale but defaulted on several payments. As you're her emergency contact, please advise." My stomach twisted. I hadn't been her emergency contact in years, but apparently, neglect didn't erase paperwork. Against my better judgment, I drove back. The house looked smaller. The garden, once full of marigolds, was overrun with weeds. Inside, Mom sat at the kitchen table surrounded by unopened bills, the TV still buzzing in the background. She looked up, startled but not exactly happy. "Well, if it isn't the artist," she said. Her voice carried that same edge, like even surprise had to sting. I told her I could help, but not as a daughter desperate for approval. As an adult making a transaction. The house was 3 months behind on mortgage. I could afford to cover it, but part of me wanted to hear her say she needed me. She didn't. She said, "You designers make big money now, don't you? Maybe you can finally be useful." The word useful sliced clean through whatever nostalgia I had left. I paid the bills that day, but I didn't tell her. Instead, I asked if she'd like to rent out the spare room to me temporarily while I sorted things out. She looked at me like I'd suggested adopting a goat. "Rent?" she repeated. I nodded. $5,000 for 3 months up front. Her eyes widened. "You can afford that?" she asked. "Evidently," I replied. For once, I enjoyed her silence. Those 3 months were an experiment in controlled tension. I woke up early, worked from my laptop, cooked my own meals. She'd watch me quietly from the sofa, as if trying to reconcile the grown woman with the girl she used to mock. Occasionally, she'd attempt small talk. Thin bridges over wide rivers. "Your brother's doing well," she'd say. "He's saving for a new truck," I'd nod. She never asked about my work until the day a magazine arrived in the mail featuring one of my designs on the cover. She picked it up, squinted, then set it down as if it might burn her. "That's nice," she said. I smiled. "Third place," I reminded her. She didn't laugh this time. By the end of the second month, things shifted. She started asking questions that weren't coded in sarcasm. "How do you even start a dress like that?" she'd ask, pointing at my sketches. "From the idea outward," I'd answer. One night, she lingered at the doorway while I sewed under the lamp. "You really love this, huh?" she murmured. I didn't look up. I did even when no one else did. The silence after that was heavier than any argument. The final week of my stay, she knocked on my door with an envelope in her hand. "Rent's due soon," she said, half smiling like she thought I might back out. I took the envelope from my purse, 5 crisp $1,000 bills, and placed them in her palm. "You earned it," I said. Her fingers trembled slightly. "You don't have to." "I know," I interrupted gently. "But I want to. Consider it repayment for the years I lived here rent-free." She swallowed hard, words forming and dying behind her eyes. For once, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That night, I packed my bags. The air in the house felt lighter, or maybe it was just me. Before I left, I walked into the living room where she sat staring at the blank TV screen. "You were wrong," I said softly. "People like us can make a living drawing dresses." She looked up, eyes glistening. "You proved me wrong, kid." "I wasn't trying to prove you wrong," I replied. I was trying to prove me right. When I closed the door behind me, the sound wasn't final. It was freeing. 6 months later, the rent she'd laughed at became the headline of my life. Local designers' collection sold out in 48 hours. The boutique that once gave me shifts now stocked my label, Marin Atelier, named after my grandmother, the only person who ever told me art could feed the soul. I didn't tell Mom about the success. I didn't have to. The news reached her the way it always had, through whispers that eventually circled back to guilt. The first message came on a rainy Thursday evening. "Proud of you," she wrote. No punctuation, no heart emoji, just 3 words heavy with unspoken history. I stared at them for a long time. I thought about replying, "Thanks," but what would that mean? Pride after disbelief felt like a receipt without a purchase. I turned off my phone and went back to work. A month later, she called. I didn't answer the first time or the second. On the third try, I picked up. "Mom?" I said cautiously. "You sound busy," she began, tone soft but calculating. "Just wanted to say you're famous now. Your aunt sent me the article. You've really made it." I waited for the but. It came quickly. "You know, the house needs repairs. The roof leaks every time it rains. Jason's helping a little, but..." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling of my studio. The same old pattern. Pride followed by a request. "I can't help with the roof," I said evenly. "But I can recommend someone reliable." Silence. Then a sigh. "You've changed," she said. "That's what success does to people." I smiled faintly. "No, Mom. That's what survival does." By the end of that year, I'd opened my own studio downtown. A sunlit loft, bolts of fabric in every shade of the sky, interns buzzing with energy. We were prepping for the spring show when an invitation arrived from the Women in Business Gala. They wanted me to speak about resilience and entrepreneurship. The irony made me laugh. A girl who used to stitch under a flickering bulb was now expected to give motivational speeches. The night of the gala, I stood backstage watching women in tailored suits sip champagne. I thought about the word family, and how it had shifted in meaning. My team was family now. The assistant who brought me coffee, the seamstress who hummed while she worked, the intern who called me boss lady, like it was a compliment. When my name was announced, the applause felt like an embrace from people who chose me, not people who were assigned to me by birth. After the event, I posted a photo, me on stage, mic in hand, captioned for everyone who was told to be realistic. Within an hour, the comments were filled with women sharing their own stories of being laughed at, dismissed, underestimated. It hit me then. My revenge was never against one person. It was against every small voice that said, "You can't." A week later, Mom showed up unannounced at my studio. I found her standing in the doorway, holding a paper bag of pastries like a peace offering. "Place looks fancy," she said, trying to sound casual. I nodded. "We just moved in." She looked around at the dresses on mannequins, the sketches pinned to the walls. "You really did all this yourself?" There was no mockery this time, just disbelief softening into awe. "With help," I replied. "Good people who believed before it was easy to." She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "I wanted to give you this." Inside was a check, $5,000. I stared at it, confused. "What's this for?" I asked. "Rent," she said quietly. "The money you gave me." "I don't want to owe you." My throat tightened. "You don't owe me, Mom." Her eyes glistened. "Maybe I do, for not seeing you sooner." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the closest thing we'd ever had to understanding. I took the check and tore it in half. "You can't buy back the past," I said softly, "but we can stop charging interest on it." She smiled, a fragile, uncertain smile, and for the first time in years it reached her eyes. She stayed for an hour, watching me work, asking gentle questions about fabric types and color palettes. When she left, she paused at the door. "Your brother still thinks you're showing off," she said with a small laugh. "Maybe I am," I replied, "but at least I've earned the right to." That night, I drove to the apartment I'd recently bought overlooking the city. The skyline shimmered like sequins, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove I belonged in its light. I opened my laptop to finalize a new project, the Lumen Grant, a fund for young designers from small towns who couldn't afford tuition. It wasn't charity. It was full circle. A few weeks later, Mom called again. "I saw the article about your grant," she said. "You're helping others now?" "Yes," I said. "Kids like me." "That's good," she murmured. "I didn't know how to help you back then." I leaned against my desk, the city glowing behind me. "You don't have to explain," I said. "You were doing the best you could with what you knew." It was true, even if her best had hurt. Months passed. We didn't talk often, but when we did, it felt lighter. Once, she even sent me a text. "Your new dress collection is beautiful." That blue one, my favorite. I screenshotted it, not for validation, just as proof that change, however late, was still possible. The following spring, I went back home for the first time since paying that rent. The house was freshly painted, smaller than I remembered. She met me at the door wearing the same apron she'd worn my whole childhood. "You look different," she said, and for once it sounded like admiration, not accusation. "So do you," I replied. We had tea in the kitchen, the air filled with quiet apologies that didn't need words. On the fridge was a clipping from the newspaper, my article from the gala, neatly folded and pinned with a magnet. She caught me looking. "You were right," she said softly. "People like us can make a living from dreams." That night, as I drove away, I realized I didn't need her approval anymore. What I'd needed all along was peace. The kind that comes when your success stops being a performance and becomes a truth. A year later, when the boutique chain signed $1 million distribution deal, I thought about the rent envelope again. How something meant as payment had turned into closure. My therapist once said revenge isn't always destruction. It can be creation, building something so undeniable that those who doubted you must face their own reflection. I finally understood. My phone buzzed as I stood in the studio, watching my team celebrate the deal. A message from Mom. Proud doesn't even cover it. I smiled, typing back. Good thing I stopped renting my worth. The world around me hummed with joy, fabrics fluttering like flags of victory. I walked to the window and saw my reflection, strong, calm, unshaken. The girl who used to draw under a yellow bulb had built her own light. And somewhere, I imagined Mom sitting in that same kitchen, maybe still watching TV, maybe still shaking her head, but this time, not in disbelief. This time, in wonder. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't slamming the door. It's knocking on it years later, successful enough to buy the house, but choosing not to. And when the laughter that once broke you finally turns into applause, you realize it was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving you were right to believe in yourself all along.